I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know the air is unfit to breathe, and our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. So, I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to take the law, we enforce it. But at the end of the day, each and every member should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer, the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan liberty for all. I am your host, Dave Bourne, and it is Wednesday, May 31st, the last day of May, and we are coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for tuning into Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We have been having some scheduling issues and are, at least as I had mentioned yesterday, for the next few weeks, should be on Monday through Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, and then after that, the schedule may change. So I will definitely keep everyone updated through the website and all of our social media platforms. But you can also listen to the archives the live stream, which we play archives and old shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on Spreaker.com or nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. Or you can listen to specific archives, including the live shows after they're completed, immediately after they're completed, on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and iTunes. On Nonpartisan Liberty for All, we promote self-ownership and the ideas of true freedom and liberty, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedoms. Exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. And we're always happy to hear from you. You can reach us via phone at 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Or you can reach us via Skype, username Nonpartisan Liberty for All. Just send a contact request, and your name and what you want to talk about. You can also email us or go to Spreaker and enter the chat room and type any questions or comments you may have. I always try to, I can see the chat room, but it's kind of, not directly facing me. It's kind of diagonal as I have two computers running, but I'll see it if you have a question or comment and want me to address it on the air but don't want to come on the air. But please feel free to contact us in any of those methods, and also go to the website and check out our original articles and blogs, as well as all of our links to our social media, Facebook pages, and the specific links to where you can get all of the archives, along with other information as well, such as pictures and bios and things like that. So yesterday's show, if you tuned in, or if you didn't tune in, we talked about government and really got into the basis of the show and what we're really trying to do as far as exposing what government really is. A lot of it that we talked about is fact. It's just like government being, or taxes being, extortion. It's a fact to look up the definition of extortion. Some of it was more opinion, but it was based on fact. I think the majority of it, I would say, is just fact. I mean, government is what it is, and you can deny that to yourself and act like we're free. It talked about freedom being an illusion. I would say that's an opinion, but is it an opinion based on facts? Yeah. I mean, that doesn't mean that, again, it's not an opinion, but it's an educated opinion based on all of the things that the government is doing. And to not be able to choose what's put in your body, or to not be able to have your privacy and everything you do being monitored or data being loaded into a database. I don't believe they have the manpower to physically, have a person monitor everybody, obviously, but via technology and via storing the data, they do. So we talked about that yesterday, and today's show, we've talked a lot about this as well, but we're going to go into detail and kind of how it relates to the government and what the government really is and stands for, and also how important it is and how it relates to the future and freedom. And that is parenting. And you can think about, well, what does parenting have to do with government? A lot. And when I think about things that can be done, and this is more in a idealistic, or a kind of if you could do anything type of scenario. What's the most important things that could be done to move closer to true freedom? And of course, one of them is always, drugs, legalizing drugs is a huge thing, because people don't realize how drugs being illegal affects so many different areas and aspects. And even, a simple example, without getting into a whole big discussion, is people that don't even use drugs being pulled over and harassed and being told, oh, we smell marijuana or something, to harass them so they can search their car. And point being that it affects people that don't even use drugs. There's people that have been killed over, oh, they raided the wrong house and they killed a kid, or, you know, so many different examples. I suggest everybody read, and I've suggested this so many times. If you're going to read one book, seriously, this is probably one of the best books I've ever read, is Rise of the Warrior Cop by Radley Balko. It goes through in detail the history of the police and no-knock warrants and raids and the drug war and all of these things. And you can really see, not just from that book, but it will start you thinking. But you can see a lot in that book. I mean, there's so much information. But it will also, from reading that book, start you thinking about things like that, like how it affects everybody. It doesn't matter whether you do drugs or you're a casual drug user or you're a drug addict or you're a big-time drug dealer. It doesn't matter who you are. It affects you whether you realize it or not. And most people say, it doesn't affect me. I don't do drugs. That's not the case. And maybe you haven't had an experience where you feel that it affected you, but it affects society in a negative way in so many ways. And even, you know, you could look at people that need money for drugs, so they break into houses or something. You know, that's another way it affects people that don't use drugs. And I don't think there's as many people doing that as you would think. Of course, media, which is controlled by government, in my opinion, not just in my opinion, but there are unclassified documents that point in that direction. They don't straight out say, well, they control this and what they, you know what I mean, what they specifically, their involvement is, but you can read between the lines. So essentially, things like that wouldn't happen if drugs were illegal neither, because people would just go to the store like anything else and buy it. You don't see people breaking into houses to buy alcohol, and if you do, it's probably teenagers that don't have any money at all or something, or you know, Miller and Bud having shootouts in the street over territory, where to sell alcohol and shit like that. So there's so many things that it affects. My point being that the connections people make with government, and of course, drugs being illegal, people would make a connection with government, but they don't make all of the connections with drugs being illegal relating to everything that it affects. And it's the same thing. And of course, it affects, you know, your freedom to put what you want in your body and all of those things too, which we talked about self-ownership yesterday, which is a big part of what I'm trying to get out there is self-ownership. I mean, that's kind of the foundation, along with what the institution of government is. But before you even get to the institution of government, to realize what it is, you have to first realize and recognize self-ownership. And along with that, after that, you know, or it kind of goes together, I guess, natural law kind of comes with that, meaning, you can do whatever you want as long as you don't hurt anybody else or their property. So that kind of all goes together, leading to, when you look at the institution of government, you go from there and look at all the laws and its legitimacy and its so-called authority and how all that's bullshit. So parenting comes in a lot of ways. And being that I brought up self-ownership, that's something that we can talk a little about at first and then get into everything else. It's not what I really wanted to start with, but since I mentioned it, one of the things, and I'll be brief about it now and get into more detail about it later, but one of the things that I've noticed is that you have people that believe in self-ownership for themselves and for adults, but don't believe in self-ownership for people under 18. Now, remember, again, 18 is an arbitrary age that was picked by the government and the U.S. government. You look in other countries, there's different ages for different things. Like most places in Europe don't have a drinking age. You don't have to be a certain age to drink alcohol. Some countries you can get married at a younger age. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the idea or concept of getting married even at 18, but there's a difference between what I believe personally and what the laws should be. So, looking at it from my perspective, the only thing I have a problem with, or kind of, hashing out in my mind, is at what point do you own yourself? And technically, you own yourself at birth. However, you can't live on your own at that point, meaning that you need parents, obviously, to feed you and to, do all these things for you, because you can't walk, you can't talk, you can't even move your hands enough to feed yourself. So, and that's something we'll get into. When does self-ownership really take effect? But I don't think there's any argument, if you truly believe in self-ownership, or a valid argument to say that, well, you don't own yourself until you're 18, because you're saying that your parents own you until you're 18. And that's also following the law of the government, which is the government is saying that your parents own you until you're 18. And I think that's a bunch of bullshit. So we'll get into more specifics on that later. So yesterday I talked about the goal of government. And just for people who didn't hear yesterday's show, or if you did, to kind of refresh everyone's memory on that, is that I believe that the goal of all governments, whether it's the U.S. or Iran or wherever, is total control over everything, including the people. And to achieve that, one of the things that they also want to do within that, as it helps them to achieve it, especially in the case of the U.S., is they just don't want to control everything. They want you to want to be controlled. They want you to worship government. And that's the whole thing about like people attacking other people for speaking out about government, like government, people that are defending government because they're so indoctrinated that they love the government. And the whole thing, and I don't believe in organized religion, but where government, I guess they have an argument sort of, but not really, because to me, religion's a level below government because you're worshiping something and somebody that made whatever laws or rules, which was man who wrote it, but they can believe whatever they want, that God wrote it, whatever you believe. If you're part of that religion, you're adhering to laws and rules, and that's where your loyalty is. So it has nothing to do with freedom, neither. It has to do with following the religion. The only difference with religion and government, depending on where you live, because I know some places they'll kill you if you don't convert to the religion, but you can get away from religion, at least as an adult. And this is something that, you know, pertains to kind of what we're talking about tonight as well as, you know, forced religion on kids. You don't inherit beliefs. And I think that is totally, I wouldn't say abuse, like your kid should be taken away, but it's wrong. If they choose to join a church or your church or whatever religion, that's fine when they get to an age that they can actually make that decision. But to indoctrinate a little kid, a toddler, with religion, I think is ridiculous. And to say that, you think of the concept, like people will say, well, what are you? Oh, I'm Catholic or I'm whatever. And they say that based on what their parents were. For the most part, there are people that convert to religions and whatever. Now, I don't believe in organized religion, so I would say I'm agnostic. Whether I believe in God or not, I don't believe in a God the same way anybody would refer to God. I believe in some force in the universe, I guess, that how everything kind of just flows. What that is exactly, I have no fucking idea, but it's not one man in the sky or something like that. So as far as the concept of God that religion presents to people, I don't believe in it. But I do say that I'm half Jewish because it's looked at as a race. And I guess that's a whole nother debate. But put it this way, there are people that would want to kill me because of the fact that my father's family was 100% Jewish. And they had a, I don't think how to explain this without sounding like discriminatory, but like they looked Jewish. I mean, my father he looked like he had a little darker skin. He had like Brillo hair, like he, you know, it was funny because he used to iron his hair. But he was, like the features of his side of the family, it was like you know what I mean? Like you could, I don't know. It from what I've read and what I've seen, it seems like a race as well as a religion. And so that's why I say that. And there's still, again, like not just people that would want to kill me, but people that would have hate towards me because of the fact that my father's side of the family is Jewish, even though I don't believe in the Jewish religion, nor do I believe in any other religion. My mother is Catholic, is actually practicing Catholic now. When I was growing up, she wasn't, and my father didn't go to temple neither, so I wasn't really brought up with any religion. Although my grandparents, my father's parents, especially my grandmother, tried to push that on me, but she couldn't really, do that. I wasn't around her enough. And, I was around her a lot, but not enough where she could, force me. And my parents wouldn't, force me to go to any of religious shit anyway. So, essentially, religion, in my opinion, is a step below government as far as the control, the having rulers. It's just that they don't have a force that is making people, in most countries, practice religion. So you can get away from it. Government, you can't get away from anywhere in the world. And you can't even get away from the U.S. government almost anywhere in the world, as I mentioned yesterday. So what I was saying about the goals of government go along with parenting in the sense that if government wants to be worshipped, they want you to defend them and, believe in nationalism and just following the government and feeling part of it and all of these fucking ridiculous concepts, obedient to it. The best way to do that, obviously, is get you when you're in your mind is in a vulnerable and, I guess, moldable state when you're a kid. And what has happened is through media, which, again, controlled by government, schools controlled by government, and also parents, because they went through, the majority of parents at least, because they went through all of that as well. Kids are being brought up in a authoritarian style. Not everybody, but the majority. And that doesn't mean even that they're necessarily hit. You don't have to be hit to be brought up in an authoritarian style environment. It's that no one's teaching kids, and this is schools, this is parents, this is everything, and they're really teaching the opposite, but to critically think and to think outside the box, and not just to think outside the box, but beyond the system, and to question the system and to stand up to the system. And no one's really teaching kids to question that. They're bringing kids up to be authoritarians, to pass them off really to the government once they're 18, because most of the parents are, like, people have probably seen, or maybe you've been told this by one of your parents. You see it in movies, well, do this, and why? Because I told you so. That type of attitude, or kids get smacked because what they did is deemed disrespectful, or not even smacked, sent to their room. I think the actual physical part of it, the kids getting hit, is happening less and less. I think that there has been progress in that area, but it doesn't mean anything as far as what I'm talking about. I mean, it's good that, okay, there's no violence, but then it's just emotional, abuse, or, by punishing somebody all the time and teaching them to obey, and you obey your parents because they're your parents, or being taught that shit, and that you have to have this parenting entity along with the government at the same time. Of course, there's all these laws that apply to kids. You have fucking elementary school kids getting arrested now, which is ridiculous. But not only do they have that, but they have the parenting side. So they have the authoritarianism, from the schools, from the police, the obedience, you must obey, and the teaching of discipline and all of this shit. And then you get it from your parents as well. And it's just drummed into people's heads. And you also have now kids being tracked basically from birth. Especially now they want you to get Social Security cards when you're born, which is ridiculous, because what the fuck does a little kid need, a baby, a fucking newborn infant need a Social Security card for? Really? They're going to be working anytime soon? They're going to be collecting Social Security anytime soon? I mean, that's a whole fucking scam in itself. But part of the scam was, and somebody said, well, that wasn't the reason why. And I think that in these fucked up minds of politicians, that there were people involved in Social Security when they came up with it in the 1930s, that did think about the unique numeric ID aspect, because it even said on the fucking card not to be used as identification. It was only supposed to be used for a bullshit program, Social Security, which really you could make more money if you just saved it and bought gold with it or something. And I say that because who knows about the fucking stock market? It's all rigged. And I say buy gold because of inflation, because if you just save your money, it's not going to grow. It's gonna be worth less. So, and I'm not an expert on investments, but I do know that your money won't be worth as much. It's like saving your money, you get penalized. And I don't trust the stock market. If you know or are able to follow the corruption, you can make a lot of money off it. So, hey, all power to you, I guess. If you're not one of the people controlling the corruption, you're just able to see it and follow it. But besides that, you might as well gamble. Fuck. I'd rather bet on the college football. But the point being is that you have these unique identifiers. They want infants to get them. And the way that they entice parents now to get Social Security cards for their infants is they changed the law on taxes. So you used to be able to deduct your kids, your dependents, based on I guess good faith or whatever you want to call it. And then if you got audited, they'd see, oh, okay, well, then you're screwed. But they came up with, oh, well, if you want to deduct your kids, they have to have a Social Security number. Now, of course, the way I'm sure they would present it, meaning the IRS and the government, would be, oh, people could be lying, so we'll do this. And I think, I don't know, because I never filled out a tax form with a deduction. I never saw of a kid, and I never saw, like, my parents when I was a kid, deduct me, because I didn't get a Social Security card until I was like 11 or 12. But, and even then, I didn't fucking need one. But I'm sure you had to have name and birth date, and you know what? They do have a record of birth because you're forced to file a birth certificate with the state. So, I mean, with the parents on it. So, if they want to verify that information, they can fucking do it that way. Although it's a lot harder, because when you have, I talked about this before, being somebody that knows a lot about databases, one unique identifier, a numeric identifier, if you can get that into everything that person does, you can link up every fucking database, every piece of data that you have on that person. So now with Common Core, part of it was they have all this information stored on computers in schools, starting from when you start school, plus the Social Security card when you're born, plus, everything you probably fill out after that, if you have a Social Security number, is going to have that number attached to it, preschool, whatever. They want to make preschool mandatory. They want to make it, public so they can extort more money. So they want, public preschool. And, of course, again, like politicians do, they exploit the real reason. The reason is they want to get a hold of your kids as young as possible. And, that also, if you look at how things used to be where only one parent had to work and they could support their family and somebody could stay home with the kids and all things like that, they want as much time with your kids as possible to keep them away from the parents as much as possible. I believe if you got a kid that's under, I don't know, just maybe an estimation, 10 or 11, the majority of time should be spent with their parents. I think all kids should be homeschooled. I think that the public school shouldn't even fucking exist, because why should people be forced to pay for other kids to be educated? Why don't, if you want to have kids, educate your own fucking kids. And you know what? I know a lot of people disagree with this and whatever. I don't give a fuck. There's people can have abortions. There's morning after pills. There's fucking pills that you can take in the first 2 months. So if you can't afford to educate your fucking kid or take care of your fucking kid, don't have one in the first place. Or give it up for adoption or whatever. And I know that a lot of times that's harder. So I understand, just not wanting to have it, period. But don't expect, one of the planks of the Communist Manifesto is public fucking schools. And people try to deny that there's not a mixture of socialism in the U.S. government. And of course there is. And I remember, I think it was Bill Maher brought up, well, public schools is socialism, and, people don't wanted to get rid of those. And I do. I want to get rid of public schools. I'm fucking consistent with at least what I believe in. I'm consistent, and if it doesn't line up with true freedom and liberty and adhere to those principles, then I don't believe in it. Now, you have all these existing things, and I don't know, it's hard sometimes because you're like, okay, well, based on the existing laws, I mean, they pass laws, so you need other laws, and it's just like, it's fucked up. But all that public schools do is, one, the majority of it is just memorization. They're not teaching you anything. They're not teaching you how to think. And I don't know that I want the government teaching people how to think. So that's why I'm against public schools. But as far as teaching people how to critically think and think outside the box and question things and come to their own conclusions and their own thoughts, I believe in that. And the public school system doesn't do that. They don't tell you to question government. They don't tell you to question the police. They don't tell you your rights. None of that. So, and essentially what's happened with kids is most people, once they turn 18 or 21, they don't give a fuck anymore about whether kids have rights or not, because it doesn't apply to them, so they don't care. Now, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of a kid. Not that I'm a kid now, obviously, but from when I was, and all of the things that affected me at that point. And now it's even worse. But it obviously had a lasting effect. And that's something I don't want to forget about. I don't want to forget about the way that kids are basically oppressed. And let's get something clear. And this point was brought up by Stefan Molyneux, and I give him credit for this point. But that nobody chooses to be born, and nobody chooses their parents. They're just here. And then you expect them to obey you and do whatever you tell them to do and be fucking obedient and get permission to do everything. I mean, the whole concept is insane. It really is to me. I understand little kids, and not that I personally understand little kids, but I mean, you know, when you're trying to teach little kids things. But a lot of this shit is just what's deemed as societal norms as well, which again, in my opinion, all of it comes from government. And parents should raise their kids this way. Like, to tell somebody that, well, I don't discipline my kid, I don't tell them what to do, they think you're nuts. Why is that? When it's their body, it's their life, especially when they're teenagers. Now, I'm not saying to be a non-existent parent and just be like, oh, you know, go do whatever and not be involved in their life. I'm talking about be as involved in their life as possible, because then you can help to guide those decisions and build a relationship based on trust. But what I am saying is that I don't know where the age is that you say, you know, and I don't think there should be any law on it. I don't think there should be well, when you're this age, you can do this. And of course, because I don't believe in government. So I think things will work themselves out. And that might be, you know, I think you're not going to have, now I don't think in every situation, and I don't think that you're going to have a utopia, but you're not going to have any more problems than you do now with kids running away and kids hating their parents and all of this stuff. You might have as many. I think you'd have less. You look at so many dysfunctional families. Now, there's other reasons. There's, financial issues is always a reason. Parents getting divorced. So many other things that come up. But in having a relationship with your kids, especially, like I said, teenagers or, even preteens, how do you expect them to I don't mean to be silent here. I'm just picturing this in my mind and thinking how to express it. I mean, most parents are like government in that they rule over their kids by fear. And how do you expect your kid to really, not that they don't love you, but it's almost like they're expected to love you and they're conditioned to love you and they love, like Stockholm syndrome. And I know that, I'm sure if people are listening to me or if they heard me say what I'm saying, comparing certain types of parenting to Stockholm syndrome, that again, people would think I'm crazy. But and they come to that conclusion right away because they don't think outside the box. They don't take the time to think about things like this. It's just, well, this is what you do, and you discipline your kids, and I'm not saying physically, and you tell them what to do and all of this fucking shit. For what? And you bring them up based on how society is. So, which is based on government. And, to be successful in society, you have to act this way. And I'm not talking about manners and general respect. I don't think that some things are customs that are based on society, but a lot of it is just general respect for other people. And I'm not talking about that because that's something that you should, to treat people like you want to be treated. I believe in that. Don't just disrespect somebody for no reason or treat them badly for no reason. But I'm talking about certain things that are considered societal norms that are the way they are because they're benefits to the government. Even having a family is a benefit to the government. And why? Well, more people for the future, more collateral for the government, because all you are is collateral. I mean, you're other things to the government, but like slaves, but you're collateral on their debt. So the more kids, the more collateral on the debt. And how are they collateral on the debt? Well, later they're going to pay taxes. So they want people to grow up to fit into the system and be working slaves that pay their taxes and contribute to the debt. And I think with all the information they have now, that they're even going to be pushing kids in certain areas. They're going to find the kids that they think are going to be trouble. And when I say trouble, I don't mean the type of trouble like even criminals, because those kids they'll probably want in the government. I'm talking that are going to stand up to the government, things like that. They're going to identify those kids, and they're going to do what they can to either get that out of them or possibly, who knows, get rid of them at some point in the future if that comes out. Now, again, I know, the government wouldn't kill anybody. Yeah, right. They do it all the time. So that's why I'm saying that you have so many parts of this that goes when it comes to kids. It's just beyond parents. It's beyond so many other things. It really goes to the same type of hierarchy where it starts, in my opinion, with the government and goes down, because the parents are the ones that are getting all this. They're absorbing it from government schools and government media and the government themselves. And then, of course, you have government organizations like CPS. So we're going to take a break and play some clips related to some of the stuff we're talking about. And when we come back, we'll talk more about kids and self-ownership and parents believing that they own their kids, and more about types of parenting and how kids are affected, and how society as a whole is being affected, and how teaching your kids in a way that instills freedom, true freedom and liberty in them, could drastically change things for the future. So we'll be back after this. Nonpartisan Liberty for All.com.
The authoritarian style of parenting is often aggressive. It lacks warmth and comfort, but demands obedience and ensures that the child follows a strict set of rules. The parent can appear very hostile towards the child. Parents who use this authoritarian style are usually harsh and rigid in their discipline and use power-assertive methods of control, such as verbal abuse or smacking. This parental behaviour can be very destructive for the child and can lead to the child becoming antisocial and fearful of their home environment. Forcing a child into submission can crush a child's spirit and make them mistrustful of others. These children are more likely to have low social competence and self-reliance. The child may even suffer mental health issues if they receive this form of parenting over the course of many years. Uninvolved parenting is a very laid-back style, where the parents let the children do what they want and allow them to learn from their own experiences. Although this style encourages children to become more active and independent, it can become neglectful if the parent fails to respond to the child's basic needs. Uninvolved parents tend to focus on their own needs and will give these a higher priority than their child's needs. This lack of an involved parental figure can lead to the child finding it hard to form relationships with others and sustain relationships over time. These children are also the most likely to have poorer school achievements and higher rates of problem behaviour. Permissive parenting.
See, I want to cut in right there real quick. They're equating letting kids do what they want to do with being uninvolved. And what I'm talking about is merging those two things. Is letting kids do what they want to do, but being very involved, more involved than the average parent. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about neglecting your kids and not having, just, go off and do whatever. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying letting them do what they want to do, but being involved in that instead of trying to control everything they do or punish them because they have a fucking opinion and they state that opinion to you.
Is a mix of authoritarian and uninvolved parenting, where the parent is very inconsistent with their behaviour. The parents may be harsh and demanding one day and uninvolved and neglectful the next. They will not set expectations for the child to live up to or demand the same level of achievement. This parenting style is very confusing to the child. Giving the child this amount of freedom can cause them to go out of control. They become uncontrollable and impulsive. A strong-willed child who has grown up with few rules and restraints can grow up to be very hard to pacify and manage. They will often express their impulses freely and are somewhat more immature than their peers, being less likely to take on responsibility and independent tasks. As you can see, authoritarian, uninvolved, and permissive parenting styles all have some negative consequences for the child's well-being. The long-term effects of these parenting styles can be damaging for the child. Fortunately, there is one parenting style that has a more positive outcome for children and parents. The authoritative style is a much more positive parenting style, where the parent uses a responsive and involved approach to the child's well-being. This parenting style is unique in that the parent will listen to their point of view and take it into account. Parents who show authoritative parenting allow their child freedom, but have consistent rules and boundaries for the child, giving them a structured and secure environment to develop and flourish in. The parents will set high standards of behaviour and achievement for their child, and will be warm and supportive in helping their child reach these expectations. This responsive approach to the child's needs leads to self-confident, socially competent children who have high self-esteem and are more likely to have good school grades. These children will have low levels of misbehaviour, psychological distress and drug abuse, and will be able to form and sustain relationships over time.
Hello, you're being recorded, just so you know.
Okay. My name's Christine Reed with THS.
Okay. May I have your card, please?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, do you know why I'm here today?
No, but I would like to know the allegations.
Okay. When I guess the police found Dante outside by himself a couple days ago, a week ago. I think it was on Sunday morning. Is that correct?
I don't know. What's your report say?
It says Sunday morning, like 7:25 a.m.
Okay.
It reports that they tried to ask him where he lives. Okay. And that he wasn't able to tell the officer, and so the officer was taking him to the police station, and then I guess got a call that his mother... Well, first, before I finish, can I ask who you are?
Well, honestly, ma'am, we do not consent to you coming into our home or interfering our children. And if you want probable cause, then you're going to have to find it somewhere else. If you come and take a look in this window, you can see that our children are not in any imminent danger or harm. So you can't get a warrant on that.
Okay, I'm not trying to get any kind of warrant, okay?
The reason why he got out, we addressed the safety concerns and we fixed it. So thank you. It won't happen again.
Okay, may I ask just who I'm talking to so I know who I'm talking to?
My name is Matthew Overland.
Okay, and you're his father?
I'm a stepfather.
Okay. Okay. Can I just ask you how you addressed how he got out?
The door it had a faulty lock on it and we fixed it.
Okay.
So he won't be getting out no more. We also plan on buying one of those safety handles with where it's overlapped to where he can't squeeze it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. You understand that I'm just required.
Fuck the motherfucking CPS. Now, basically, anybody can file a fucking complaint against you. And supposedly, the CPS believes that they can do whatever the fuck they want, that they are like above the law. So I know that if CPS ever came to my house, they are not getting in. That's just bottom line. Nor am I speaking to them. They can go fuck themselves. And if somebody called CPS based on not knowing anything or thinking, because there'd be no reason, first of all, for anybody to call CPS. But people have calling CPS to fuck with people. I know people who've had CPS called on them, and they didn't do anything. Sometimes it was relatives, that they were trying to get back at them or neighbors or whatever. So that's an organization that is very fucking dangerous. And if you listen to, I forget his name, but he's a former, he used to work for the CPS and talks about how they had quotas, that all they care about is, you know, taking kids away and all of this shit and fucking kids up, basically, because they're worse off. And not only that, but getting involved in people's lives. It's like once they get involved in your life, it's bad. Because then, you know, they can come up with these conditions that you have to abide by and all of this bullshit. And they're it's the government trying to control how you parent your kids. And in probably 99% of the cases, it's not needed. But because of that 1%, they're like, yes, we need an agency that can come in and take the kids away and whatever. And I believe that's because of other laws. Because if you're old enough where you can report something yourself, or you're a teenager and you can just leave, if you were able to go live with a friend, but you can't because the government says you got to be 18, you know, things would be a lot different when it came to things like abuse. And I'm not saying that there aren't a lot of shitty parents and abusive parents that beat their kids and shouldn't have kids. But what's happening is the majority of cases are cases where you're taking a kid and putting them in a worse situation. And the situation that they're in does not call for government involvement. But if CPS didn't have any cases or any reports, then they'd have nothing to do. And the whole, you know, probable cause or all these standards of confronting your accuser go out the window with the CPS, it seems, from what I've, you know, researched and stories that I've heard. So, but we'll get back to the clip.
When the police makes a report, that I'm required to come out to the home and try and talk to you guys.
I understand that, ma'am, and I appreciate you doing your job.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's all. Your wife doesn't want to speak to me?
No, ma'am, she does not.
Okay. All right. I will write up my report.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
An 11-month-old baby was removed from his parents' home in Napa as his father was taken away in handcuffs. Now, what was the parents' crime? Well, apparently they were using their legally prescribed medical marijuana. And as an officer entered after getting a call saying that there was some loud noises from a neighbor, a cop enters and says, quote, "Your baby doesn't need to be subjected to marijuana." So a social worker is then called into the scene, and the social worker determines that this child should be placed in foster care. Now, to give you some more details on this story, again, these parents were using medical marijuana obviously for
legally.
Exactly. So they both had prescription.
One fact that I want to bring up that some people might not know, I think most people know this, that foster parents get paid. They get an allowance from the state. I don't know how much it is. It depends on probably the county that you live in and the state. And if they have, you know, a lot of them have multiple kids. So I don't want to say that they can make money off taking in foster kids, but it seems like they can. And this was a TV show, so I'm not going to say this is something that really happened, but it could, where it was on the show Shameless on Showtime, but there was a foster parent who had all these kids, and she had them making clothes and all the shit that she could sell. And, that's not an impossibility. But a lot of times what happens is, and there's so many reports of this, that kids are getting molested in foster care. And, you have a kid who gets taken away from their parents for something like smoke, because their parents are smoking marijuana, whether they have fucking a medical marijuana card or not. It's crazy. I mean, even if they're doing fucking drugs, it depends on the level. If you have a parent that is neglecting their kids because they're a drug addict, if you're a functional fucking drug user and you take care of your kids and they're well provided for, it's, to me, it's not a fucking issue. And then, you have a kid that gets taken away and molested, and then they're fucked up for life. It's, there's a lot more to it than that. I'm kind of just really summarizing it, and not going into a lot of detail, but it's just the fact that the government believes that they not only they own your kids, but they own you too, and that they can come in and take your kids away basically if they fucking feel like it, based on whatever standards. And that's what happens with laws. You look at the business of laws. Laws are written open-ended. So essentially, neglect is open to fucking interpretation. Or, the other words that they use. So many of them are open into interpretation. So you can say that, well, this parent is neglecting their kid, or they're not doing what they should, because you have these words that really can encompass so much if you want them to. And that's why they write the laws the way they do. There's no law that says if a parent is using drugs, they can have their kids taken away, as far as I know, in any state. Now, there are laws for child neglect, or, other type of laws that they could use to go after somebody that's using drugs. In this clip, you'll hear I think it's this clip that they make a point about. It might be a different one, but I think it's this one, that there's a point about, what about parents that are on prescription medication from doctors? So because it's a prescription, and the parents are depressed or have anxiety or whatever, that's fine. But if you're on a prescription for marijuana, it's not. Or if you're self-medicating, but you're still taking care of what you need to. I mean, in one country, and I forget the country, it might have been Germany, they assigned basically a social worker to everybody who had a kid until age 5. They'd have like a social worker. And I think that's something that we could see in the future, where the government wants to monitor all kids, and they want to monitor what you're teaching them. And it's not because they give a shit about the kid's welfare and if the kid is being taken care of. They give a fuck if the kid is I wouldn't say worshiper of government, but is in that, fits in to their agenda, that they subscribe to government's agenda of control, and that they believe in all that shit. That's the most important thing to the fucking government. So if you have parents teaching kids about freedom or about, things like that, at some point CPS has, in certain instances, they'll get involved with shit like that too. I mean, that's what's coming, and that's why a lot of this shit is fucking scary, and people don't even want to fucking think about it. But you look at all the laws that have been passed in executive orders and the things that they can do legally. Now, it doesn't even matter the fact that they can do legally, because the government can do whatever the fuck they want, whether there's a law for it or not, and they can get away with it. Judges, I mean, the whole fucking court system is ridiculous. The whole setup of the court system, the power of judges, a lot of people don't even know any of this shit because they've never been in a courtroom, but the power of judges and the whole system, and to put somebody's life or a decision that would affect somebody's life in the hands of one person, and you have an appeal process, but it's all money, and you can't appeal unless you have fucking thousands of dollars to pay lawyers and appeals fees. My transcript of my fucking case, and this is a minor misdemeanor. It's like it wasn't called a minor misdemeanor; it was called a misdemeanor, but it is the level of the lowest misdemeanor that you can get. I had to pay $300 just for a transcript to appeal, never mind lawyers' fees. And now we're getting a little off topic, but you get into things like that in family court if you get your kids taken away by CPS, and then all the shit that happens when CPS gets involved. That's why, like, things like once you get arrested, you've lost. And I mean that in the sense that no matter what happens, unless you're able to sue and you get money, your time has been taken away. You're going to lose money paying lawyers, whatever. Same thing with CPS. You get your kids taken away. You don't get to see your kids for that time. And you have to go and pay a lawyer and go through all of this shit. So I guess that's if they actually take them away. But once they get involved, it's not a good thing. Whether they do an investigation and it comes back that, okay, everything's okay, you do not want government involved in you or your kids or your life, period, because it's never a positive thing. And it's never for the purposes that they say it is. It has nothing to do with helping, protecting, none of that. And that's why keep your kids out of government schools, because that's a huge thing that not only does it stop the indoctrination of schools that kids get from public schools, is it keeps the government from knowing all this shit about your kid and tracking all their information and putting them in a fucking database and tracking every aspect they can. Now, to stay off the radar totally is impossible, but there's things you can do to minimize your visibility, we'll say. And they're not illegal. I'm not talking about illegal stuff. But don't even send your kid to government school. That's, you're setting them up for a life that, I can't predict the future, but I see what's going on and I see where things are going. And it's a fact right now that all this stuff is being tracked and things that you wouldn't even think of. I mean, they had like the questionnaire of from Common Core, and it's like 50 different items that they're tracking, plus anything they do goes into this database, and I'm sure they do analysis on them and all of this stuff that we don't know about, and that they're calling kids global resources. They're they're thinking about how kids can help the government, really. Meaning that, okay, we need people in these types of jobs based on this kid's, all the information we tracked over his life. We're going to point him in this direction and, get him involved in this type of work or, shit like that. It's very frustrating to even think about because it's total 1984, whatever science fiction fucking crazy shit that is out there, book or movie. It's really coming to fruition. And I, as I talked about yesterday, I think that was the government's plan from the beginning. And now with the technology, it's, it makes it even easier for them. If you look at East Germany or even Nazi Germany, taking East Germany is probably a better example because it lasted a lot longer, but they tracked people. They had the Stasi, the secret police, and all of this stuff. And you think, like, how are they able to do that with the limited technology? And, of course, whatever technology they have that we know of, they probably have 20 times at least the technology exists, and we don't know about it. But they were able to do that, 30, 40, 50 years ago. I mean, East Germany started after, World War II. And then what they were able to do in Nazi Germany as well. But that was a little different circumstance because of, the majority of the time Hitler was in power was war, not the whole time, but for most of it. East Germany was a country, it was backed by Russia, but that went on for 40, 50 years? Like that. And even the Soviet Union. And they were huge. So to say that can't happen, or the thing is that can't happen here is what people say. It is happening and it has happened. It's just how far are you going to let it go? And how far does it continue? It's going to continue as far as they can take it. So, and the whole, I'm not doing anything, so what does it matter? That's just a fucking cop-out. That's, you want to rationalize it in your head and, sit there and ignore the realities. I've told this story before. Somebody said that to me. Well, I'm not doing anything, and plus, what can I do about it anyway? And I said, all right, well, let me read your, give me your phone, let me read your text messages. And they're like, no. Okay, well, you don't want me reading them, but you don't care that they're in a database that complete strangers have access to and know all this stuff about you. So.
Prescription, so he used it for anxiety and chronic pain, and she used hers for depression and anxiety. So
Jesus.
here are two
Model parents. Okay, sorry, keep going.
I'm sorry, but you make a joke of it, but there's so many people on prescription drugs. This is no different from a parent being on, say, Zoloft or Prozac and having kids. Many people have kids, and they need to take medication, right? Whether it's for physical ailment or emotional, psychological ailment, whatever it is.
Right.
The point is, these people, these parents, were taking medicine, right? Something that was legally prescribed to them that could arguably make them better parents, right? By decreasing their anxiety. And here are some police officers saying, sorry, it's classified as a Schedule I substance by the DEA. I think you're a bad parent, so I'm taking your kid away.
Right. Okay.
So the problem here is that there's a huge discrepancy in the way we treat marijuana and the way in sort of some states versus other states, how we treat it at federal level, state level, and then also how it is viewed by different agencies. So for the child protection agencies and the like, marijuana is treated the same as heroin, cocaine, or methamphetamines, right? So they're saying we don't care that it's a legally medicated
substance,
herb.
right.
We're going to think of it as meth. And so we're taking your kid away. And these kids are potentially suffering. They're being taken away from good homes. So the parents argued that they're nurturing parents. The parents didn't have any other charges against them as we know it. The reason why the cops were there simply because somebody heard loud noises coming from there. So it was not at all related to the children. But I think this brings to light a lot of questions on how we treat marijuana, not just in terms of how we take it personally, where we should be able to smoke it or consume it or whatever, but also how it's affecting families and the family structure.
Right. Okay.
What do you make of it?
Oh, God, where to begin? I mean, listen, there is clearly a dislocation between, and it's going through some growing pains, this transition between acceptability, the legal, the letter of the law and the sort of the actuality of the implementation of it. And there's clearly some residual stigma attached to, using marijuana, even if it is in this instance used for medicinal purposes. So that's the first thing to note. And I get that. My question to you, though, is would you feel comfortable, I put you on the spot, but let's theoretically say that you were taking it for medicinal purposes. Would you smoke it around an infant? Would you smoke it around a 2 or 3 year old? Or would you choose to perhaps remove yourself from that situation, or remove your child from the situation where there's passive smoke, where there's that kind of, it's because it isn't like taking Xanax, that is purely an internal medicine that you take.
But marijuana can be a purely internal medicine as well. You don't just need to smoke it. You can take it as an oil, you can take it as a pill.
Do we have the facts in this case, and were they smoking it? Or
they smelled it, so we don't know exactly what's happened, but the officer said that they smelled it.
What's fucked up is, they could say that about marijuana smoke, and they're failing to mention how it's been proven that cigarette smoke is, can cause, secondhand smoke can cause cancer. So what about parents who smoke cigarettes? It's just using a reason, again, to take kids away. I mean, that's their job. Government wants to get control of what they can. And if they could take all kids away and they would be all at public boarding schools, they would do it. And maybe they have plans to do that in the future. But that's, it's about control. Ultimately, and turning that control into the brainwashing of people that worship the government. They don't just want people to obey. They want people to believe. And that's even worse. It's not just about, it's like in 1984, if you've seen, I didn't read the book, I saw the movie, but how they wanted him not just to obey, they wanted him to love the state and believe in the state. And ultimately, that's what they want. And they can use all these fucking reasons why they're doing certain things, and people buy it because they don't think outside the box. They don't think the government would do those types of things. It's so ridiculous why they can't, but it's just a big contradiction, because talk about how dangerous things are, and there's terrorists and there's murderers and all of these things, but none of those people could get into government, of course. I mean, it's I don't know.
So you're making a good argument. You're saying perhaps there was a contact high. Am I concerned about that? But again, some children are even taking marijuana for medical reasons themselves, right? Especially in cases of like epilepsy, and it's been very effective. So I take your point.
This was an 11-month-old. Sorry to cut you off. This was an 11-month-old.
This was an 11-month-old. But we don't necessarily know how much of how exposed the child was to it, or if even it was having an effect on the child. We don't know that, and we also don't know how marijuana impacts parenting. So according to a professor at the Department of Social Services and Welfare at UCLA, who studies medical marijuana and parenting, quote, "We really don't know what's going on. We don't know whether medical marijuana affects parenting or whether caseworkers need to be concerned when they find out this is happening in the home." So there is this sort of potential risk that perhaps the parents aren't paying as much attention to their infant. Maybe their response is slightly delayed.
Right.
They can say, there's possible danger of having marijuana in the home from ingestation if the child consumes it, or if there's a contact high, things like this. But I would argue that it's no different from having Advil in your house, or from, taking Xanax or Prozac. It all has these sort of negative consequences, and I think we as adults should be able to determine how we raise our children and under what substances we raise them.
I agree with that up to a certain point, because and the point at which I don't agree is on some level, I don't care that there's uncertainty. I don't care that, we're not really sure, and let's have a look at whether the parents are going to be affected. Fuck that. The fundamental problem is the welfare of the child is paramount, and you need to be an adult about it, and if you're going to have children, you're going to need to step up and actually behave appropriately.
And who are you to decide what's fucking appropriate? And you're going to bring the kid into foster care, so they're in a better situation. That's a better situation.
So the fact that you may or may not have medicinal marijuana, you have to do that in a responsible fashion. And it strikes me that in this instance, that wasn't the case. So you know what? Fuck you. And your...
How about fuck you? Go back to fucking England.
Ability to, or your rights to have my medical marijuana. The welfare of the child is paramount. End of story.
So I would argue that in this case, the child's welfare was not necessarily protected.
Even if it's a question mark, even if it's a question mark.
Yeah, if it's a question mark, just take the kid away and put him in a worse situation. What are you, fucking nuts?
What if they took away your child?
There's no discussion to be had. If there's even a scintilla of a question,
but here it's about...
Nobody in general, loves a kid more than their own parents. And I mean no other parents in general. Now, you have a lot of exceptions to that rule. But taking a situation like this and taking a kid and putting them in foster care, what situation do you think is better for the fucking kid? And who is the fucking government to decide in the first place? It's just, I know there are situations that, and they're very obscure. People think, we need the CPS because, these things happen all the time. No, they don't. We hear about the crazy shit, like the psychos who put like their baby in a microwave or something, fucking sadistic and insane. But that is very fucking rare. And people that beat up infants or sexually molest infants. I mean, you hear about those because the media, one, does it on purpose because they want people to fear everything. So they need the government to come in and ease that fear. And, they want society to need government, or at least think that they need government. And, so they promote this shit like it happens all the time, bad things where you look at the percentage of the population and the amount of times things happen. It's totally distorted on purpose. It's distorted by design, like terrorism. The chance of you getting killed by a terrorist in the United States is like being struck by lightning twice in 1 week. I mean, it's just ridiculously low. we had this fucking warning this week. Oh, the Strip, here in Las Vegas, there's been this is how fucking stupid the government is, and how stupid a lot of the people in the public are, because they had a video that said, "Oh, do attacks on America," supposedly an ISIS video, probably created by the CIA, who runs ISIS anyway. And in the clips, they showed the Las Vegas Strip at the end. They showed snippets of like a couple seconds of it. So right away, it's, Las Vegas is a confirmed target. And terrorism is the best thing that could happen to the U.S. government, because it's a never-ending fucking war that they can use to exploit everything they want when it comes to control and power.
Theoretical potential risk. It's not actual risk. Here it was simply like, oh, I theoretically believe that this could potentially be bad for your child. Therefore, I'm removing your child from your home for 2 weeks almost, right? That we know is bad for a child. To remove them and put them in foster care for 2 weeks just puts the father in jail. That causes stress and trauma both for the child and the family, and it disrupts the familial structure. So that is a problem. That's something we have hard evidence and we know is bad for the kid. Now the question is, which is worse, right? That somebody is relaxing themselves with medical marijuana, and say ingesting it in oil form. Is that worse than taking a child away from a mother and father and putting them in foster care for weeks? I think the answer is quite obvious here.
What's going on, Internet? It is your boy, Eric Van Holtz, back again with another awesome episode from Beard Brand. Hope all's going well on the other side of the Internet. It's been a little while since I've broached into the personal freedom videos, but I wanted to talk about something that's really intriguing to me, kind of introduce you guys to this idea. And, it's a new journey for me. It's something that I'm learning about, and maybe try to build a community of other like-minded people out there. It's called peaceful parenting. And for those who don't know, I had my firstborn about a year ago. And, oh my God, is she not cute? Look at that girl. So, that's my daughter. And when you become a parent, and I'm sure there's a lot of other fathers out there who watch this channel, there's all sorts of ideas on how to raise your children. And I'm not here to tell you this is how you raise your children. What I'm here to do is say, this is what's intriguing to me, and this is something that I want to do. And just share it with you guys. And if you find it intriguing as well, we can talk more about it. If you don't find it intriguing, then we can skip over it. But the basic concept of peaceful parenting is that your parenting style is without any kind of punishment, like spanking or timeout. And instead you try to parent them through empathy and understanding the situation and understanding their development and reacting accordingly. So it's not about having perfect little children who are very well behaved, but it's about communicating with your child directly, helping them understand how people interact and understand the situation the best to their ability, and then helping them learn and grow and become stronger individuals and more independent individuals. And one of the downsides, I want to say downsides, but with traditional, I'm going to call it traditional parenting because I don't know if there's a term for it, but when you punish a child or when you spank them, what you're doing is you're creating a hostile relationship between you, the parent, and the child, where the most important people in their lives are abusing them. Spanking is a physical abuse. Yelling is also a verbal abuse. And then punishment is a form of, abuse as well. I don't know if punishment, if abuse is the right word. I don't want to get into semantics. hopefully you understand what I'm saying. If not, then just talk semantics and call me an idiot. But anyways, so you're building this divide between you, your child, who has no option in their parents at all. Like, they're born into us. We are all that they have. They don't have the choice to say, oh, I want to go to my neighbors to be my parents, or I want to go to my grandparents to be my parents. Their only choice is us. So it's our duty to be the best parent that I can. And for me, that means if there is a situation arises when my child is misbehaving or not acting appropriate, it's an opportunity to educate her on the appropriate actions and calm her down in a way that she can understand when I'm talking. So it takes a little bit of time to calm down, get down at their level. It's a very energy-intensive process to be a peaceful parenting. It doesn't...
Right. See, I agree in that. I see that as a learning opportunity where you can talk to them, and I'm not even talking about telling them you got to do this or you have to do that, where it's a learning opportunity to talk to them and say, explain why something is inappropriate or wrong or whatever, and that why they shouldn't do it. Not, if you do this, I'm going to punish you, or don't do that, or shut up, or all of these things that a lot of parents will say to their kids. No. And it's, the more I think about it, the more it's almost like government. It really is. Because you're ruling, some people believe that they own their kids and they're ruling over them. And it's like, you see this reinforced, and I'll talk about this after I have one more clip, but every show I see this. And that's what I was talking about, in the title, the media and government really trying to reinforce this, because I see this in almost every fucking movie or TV show or any kind of media, the reinforcement of being an authoritarian parent. And again, I'm not talking about hitting, because now, like, they don't show that. I mean, unless, it's a movie about abuse or a show, whatever. But I mean, just the normal characters that are supposed to be the average family, it's all about, you can't do this or you can't do that, or, oh, Dad, can I do this weekend? No, because whatever. Like, permission to do anything. It's fucking, the more I think about it, the more insane I think it is, especially when you're talking about teenagers. I think it's just fucking ludicrous. And that doesn't mean you can't advise them and say, look, I don't think personally it's a good idea, and I wouldn't do it, but I'm not going to stop you if that's what you really want to do. And hopefully you've developed a relationship of trust up to that point that they will listen to you and consider what you're saying and think, well, maybe my parents are right and I shouldn't do this. But that's by being involved and being, developing a relationship and a foundation, and a relationship based on trust and honesty and all of this stuff. Not fucking a relationship based on fear. I'm not going to do... What is the point of that? Because once somebody gets out of the house, they're going to do what they're going to do. And if they learn that, oh, well, I didn't do this when I lived with my parents because I was afraid of them punishing me, or being grounded or whatever. But now I don't have that. Then they're going to do that shit. If they didn't do things because they had a relationship where you talked with them and they came to the conclusion that, you know, my parents are right, that this is kind of a fucked up thing to do, and they believe it's wrong, then that instills that in them for, you know, permanently, for when you're not around, because you can't always be around. You can't stop kids, especially teenagers, from doing what they want to do, because they're going to fucking do it. So either you can have a relationship with them built on trust where you know what's going on and you can try to at least advise and help them as much as you can and be there for them, or you can be a fucking idiot and be an authoritarian and try to tell them what to do until you can't anymore because they're old enough to leave, and then they'll go crazy and wild doing all this fucking shit. And now that's the, I guess, stereotypical scenario, or a person who's been repressed, their parents have stopped them from doing anything, and then they go wild when they go to college or something. But it's also, you know, something that does happen. It might not happen at extremes, but still. And yeah, I mean, of course, that is my opinion, but at the same time, it's also about building the foundation of being able to think for yourself and not just being told all the time what to do. And when you're advised not to do something, that you're explained why this is wrong, and that you're able to disagree with it. Some parents, they would call it talking back and ground their kids. Oh, you talk back to me, so you're punished. For what? Giving their fucking opinion?
You can't just spank them and send them on their way and expect them to learn. You've got to calm them down, help them understand what you're trying to say, and explain to them why that situation's not right. In addition to that, as a parent, you've got to understand the various cycles of childhood. Similar to how when a baby cries, maybe at inappropriate times, you don't spank the baby or punish the baby to get her to stop crying. What you do is you feed her, or, you know, change her diaper, or what else do you do with babies? Put them to bed. And the same thing happens as a child develops throughout their whole life, and how people develop as well. So as they hit their toddler ages, they're running into different things, and they're trying to understand language, and maybe they can't communicate at the level that I can communicate at. I've been speaking for 30 years or so, right? And I've got a pretty good grasp of conversation and language, and not a perfect one, as you could see earlier in my video. But children don't have that same type of skills developed. So we need to be patient with them and really give them all the tools possible to help them better communicate with us. And patience is one of the things. And one of the great things about being to have a perfect child, I'm going to strive to have a child who's open to learning and who is not afraid to communicate with me and not afraid to spend time with me.
Nonpartisan liberty for all, and we are back, even though I was kind of commenting on some of those clips there. But we're running out of time, so I want to make sure we get to a few more things before we end the show. Why I think this is so important, as I mentioned, is if even 50% of the population raise their kids in a freedom-oriented manner where they're not told what to do, they're not disciplined, and again, I don't mean that you're not involved. I think that is a very important aspect because you want your kids to know that you love them and that you're there for them and to be involved. And of course, I mean, I would think if you have kids and you wanted to have kids that you want to be involved in their life anyway, just because you love them and you care about them and want to be involved in what's going on with them. So I'm not saying that because you don't discipline your kids and you don't tell them what to do, that means that you just send them off like, oh, go do whatever, bye. No. You, I think, have to be more involved than a parent who does discipline. But all that does is, again, it creates fear. It doesn't matter the type of discipline. It could be grounding. And as I'd mentioned before, and they mentioned in one of the clips, I mean, your kids don't get to choose who they're born to or if they're born at all. And to have a kid and then treat them like your own piece of property because you can, basically. I mean, you want to talk about abuse and don't get me wrong, I don't think these people should have their kids taken away. I don't believe in government, taking kids away, period. I think that, family and especially if you're, with the exception of toddlers and infants, old enough to be able to voice, abuse, that family or friends or whatever should fucking take your kids away on their own. But with teenagers, they should be able to, if they're living in an abusive household, they should be able to fucking leave if they can. I mean, and a lot of kids have friends where they could go live with their friends and their parents, or because of things like the government fucking printing money like it's nothing, it's hard for a high school kid to have a full-time job, or not have a full-time job, go to school full-time and be able to fucking live by themselves. But if a bunch of high school kids got together and got a house, because they lived in bad situations, they could possibly do that. But they can't because they have to be 18 or go through the courts and get permission from the government. So it's, I don't know. But my main point is that by being an authoritarian parent, or even now they're talking about, they call them helicopter parents. Those are more like they're nervous all the time and hovering, and they don't let their kids do things because they're scared, and that whole fucking thing, and that contributes to, but I think that's a little different than an authoritarian type parent, but it's pretty close. But being that way, you're just raising a kid. I mean, now a lot of kids are going to rebel, but it's still going to be in their head somewhere. And you're raising a kid to be an obedient slave. And if, 50% of the population changed how they brought up their kids, and you had a whole generation of kids that thought for themselves and challenged authority and challenged all of these things and wanted to live their life the way they wanted to live it, as long as they didn't hurt anybody else, then, that would make a huge difference, I believe, in society. And that's why, to me, it's up there on, as far as when it comes to changing hearts and minds and getting people to change the way they do certain things, or, even changing laws when it comes to drugs. But that comes from people's beliefs on something. So it's the same thing, changing people's hearts and minds on drugs as well. And, those are two very important things that I believe, not those alone, are going to bring, true freedom and liberty. But those are two things that I think will definitely put us in the right direction and make a difference. Now, how much of a difference, I don't know, because the more powerful the government gets, the more technology they get, the more information, the more weapons, the more all of that stuff. The harder it is to, stand up and change things. And of course, that's, all outside the system. It's not changing things through the system, as I've talked about. You're not going to change, especially when, I don't agree with the system, because I don't agree with the institution of government. So the way to make any changes is not through the system. You don't change the system using the system. It's just ridiculous. But the independent thought and the ability to think outside the box is something that I see is lacking in, I can't really speak to other countries. I don't know. I mean, but it definitely is in the United States as a whole in general. There's a certain amount of people that do, obviously. But even those people, as I was talking last night, I don't think see the big picture and see government for what it really is and see the institution for what it really is. And I think part of that is, again, how people are just brought up, how the government gets a hold of them at a young age and starts indoctrinating them, and then how media follows the government. And it's not just the news. It's, as I was saying, it's movies, it's TV programs, it's all the families you see that are supposed to be considered your normal American family. That's how they treat their kids and bring up their kids. And it's crazy. Like I said, the more I think about it, the more fucked up I really think it is. And I realize the older you get, you get more life experience and more knowledge and whatever. But people also have to make their own mistakes. There's no replacement for experience. You can tell them that you experienced something and you experienced all these things throughout your life and try to have them learn from your mistakes. But they have to make their own mistakes as well. And hopefully the mistakes aren't, something that's serious, that, as far as life-threatening or, getting seriously hurt or something like that. But, they have to live their own lives and make their own mistakes, and it's their lives and it's their mistakes to make. And that might be the biggest thing, going back to self-ownership. But remembering that self-ownership is not just something, it doesn't start when the government says it starts. It doesn't start at 18 because the government says you're an adult at 18. Or it doesn't start at 21 because, that's the fucking drinking age. So, I guess, I hope what people get out of this, if nothing else, is to think about how they raise their kids and how they felt as kids and how they were treated. Now, they might think, well, you're a kid. That's how you're supposed to be treated. But it's not. Kids are people. And if you love your kids, how can you fucking treat them like that? Really? I don't get the punishment philosophy. I don't. And you love your kids and care about them and want what's best for them, but you want to punish them, and I don't know. I don't understand it. So, I understand people getting frustrated and maybe saying things that they don't mean and yelling at their kids because they just, and then apologizing after, like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I mean, that happens with everybody in all types of relationships where you get frustrated and say something and, but it's like you see on TV, it's like the calm, oh, you're grounded. Oh, okay. I deserve it and whatever. And it's fucking retarded. But that's what they're trying to present to people. It's just, I don't know. But that's all the time we have for tonight. So I plan on being back tomorrow. And as I said, definitely for the next couple weeks, we should be doing shows Monday through Thursday. And I appreciate anybody who tuned in. And definitely, if you have any comments or questions or whatever, just go to nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. You can email us. You can leave comments on the episodes or whatever you want to do. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Have a good night.
listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it.